Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. As I had promised you, unfortunately, March is not quite my busiest streaming month ever, nor will be the beginning of April, but I still found some time today. Obviously, we have some pretty big news today, even though it's more news for the future, but it's still something, in my opinion, very much worth discussing because it also connects to a lot of previous leaks, rumors, discussions we've had on this channel. And to be quite honest, I'm just glad to be back here with you guys. I know, very irregular streaming schedule, so thank you to anyone who still finds these streams, who leaves comments, who leaves likes. It all helps tremendously, not just for the channel, but for me personally. It motivates me, it gets me going, it encourages me to also engage more with you, getting your opinions, your agreements, your disagreements, maybe occasionally even having small debates with you guys. Still not sure if it's worth making like a Discord thing where we can call each other, but I'll let you know in April. So much just came up in March that I just haven't found time. I apologize for that. But obviously, we do have stuff to talk about, and the most important stuff we have to talk about today is we have an Apple event coming up. Now, this Apple event is 2.5 months away, so and it is an event we kind of knew was coming, but it's still an Apple event nonetheless, which is a rare occasion, right? Even in the last few months, we've had Apple announcing the iPad Air, the A16 powered iPad, the M4 MacBook Air. Before that, the M4 MacBook Pro and Mac Mini and iMac, right? And all of those things were not events. They were press releases. Some of them had YouTube videos attached to them. But when it comes to really big events, the last one goes back to the iPhone. So yeah, pretty much definitely now worth talking about. Right now, of course, we get it every year. This is primarily a software event for Apple. It's geared towards developers. I mean, it's literally called the Worldwide Developers Conference. But sometimes there's new hardware. And even if there isn't, I would argue there's enough to be excited about just in software for this year. We have Angelica joining the chat, saying she's very happy that she could join from the first minute on. I'm very glad to have you guys very early on too as well. Thank you so much. Tipper Master joining the chat, saying the WW banner plus Gurman's reporting seems to be in sync with his word about returning to AI you wanted to lick. Ah, nice Steve Jobs reference. As Jobs described Aqua when he launched it. True. We can actually find a clip of that. By the way, did Alex finally put out something? Jesus, I wanted his Mac Studio videos where he combines all of them via Thunderbolt. It's those Nvidia shit reveals really took a lot of attention away from LLM developers on YouTube, and we haven't yet gotten the Mac Studio content I wanted to react with, Steve Jobs Aqua lick. Lick it.
One of the design goals was when you saw
why can I not hear it?
You wanted to lick it.
I wanted to lick it. I love that. Such an iconic freaking quote. And Relay joining the chat, also finding his way over. Thank you guys so much. I've already apologized for the irregular schedule, but I'll still apologize to anybody who's joining. Thank you so much for still finding me. Yeah, this is definitely and when we think about the original Aqua design, right? Aqua had a shit ton of transparency and stuff like that. In fact, that's kind of what motivated a lot of stuff in the industry at that time. Windows Vista, for example, was notorious for being super system heavy, because it had animations and systems of translucency and transparency back in the day that just weren't really possible to reach without running the hardware at full speed, which of course is not the greatest thing if you need full speed just to run your basic operating system. Aqua, that was in the days of OS 10, not Mac OS, right? So we have a lot of shininess primarily here, right? We have a lot of icon designs that still kind of are with us. Now, obviously, a lot has changed since then. Jesus Christ, Wikipedia sucks sometimes with images. Don't know why. Right, so it's very recognizable, I would say, right? Like from the core layout to a lot of the iconography, and then of course a lot of the systems gradually changed. Now, my favorite operating system design of all time is actually not even what we have right now, even though I am a big fan of flat designs, but oh my God, what was that version called? macOS. Was it the version right after Mountain Lion? What followed Mountain Lion? I think I'll have to. Catalina? So I loved it when the icons on Mac weren't all. Oh, Jesus, it's all Wikipedia. I loved it when the icons on Mac weren't all uniformly shaped. I think that gives a really nice design to Windows, and I think the transparency and translucency that a lot of it introduced as well was really hype. So macOS Catalina, really a phenomenal design. My favorite icons of all time. The fact that Apple was able to play with shapes here. I love the current design. I think it's a very small downgrade from this, but I still think it's a downgrade. Tippermaster also think they should just do a cute little flip on stage, changing the 6 to a 9, so macOS 19 and iOS 19 sync up. I actually would like that too, though that's because I'm a nerd and I also have a mild form of OCD. So I fully understand the wish to do so, but I also understand why Apple wouldn't see that as a priority, right? Relay being a good chatter boy saying, I see a Mark stream, I click and press like. That's what you're supposed to do. And to anybody who still hasn't liked the video or hasn't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Please comment. You guys see I love interacting with a lively live stream. And you can also become a supporter right here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, and Max Maximus. Thankfully, none of you guys left despite my hiatus. And you can also become a supporter over on Patreon. Thank you guys so much. Focus, I haven't seen you either in a while or ever, saying Windows XP was peak Windows. I don't know, like the Windows Vista design, and I mean, we are kind of rambling, right? We're not really talking about dub at this point, but that's probably because there isn't that much to talk about. What was the Windows Vista design language called? Windows Aero was used as the design language of Windows Vista and Windows 7. I have to say, I always liked Windows Aero. I don't think it was perfectly executed because there was still a lot of old stuff in the operating system, like Windows 98 icons and shit like that. And I don't like the widgets, especially given how, even ignoring the design, I think that a lot of them were just like super basic and pretty lazy. Jesus, it's all Wikipedia, but is it at least a sharp image here? No, you cannot load a high resolution preview. That's such shit, man. Yeah. Jesus. Windows error. Right. So you have, wait, is that Vista? Yeah, the widgets tell me it's Vista. Yeah, it's a little inconsistent, but you do have like the transparency and translucency elements here, which I do really like, and I actually think they were designed rather well. Like they weren't that visually distracting. But then you look at, oh Jesus, it's all Wikipedia. Oh God, I wish people just had other sources. Wikipedia is a website. It's just not that great, unfortunately. Wow, the Microsoft Wiki fandom, nice. Oh my God, that just looks like an offshoot Wikipedia. I'm going insane here. Okay, but that's at least a high resolution image, right? So I just have to say Windows Vista had garbage icons across the board. Like they tried to give them like some reflective sheen and shit like that, but it just did not work. And then of course when you look at the shit that was able to be ported like on your desktop, right? It just all looked incredibly inconsistent, but the basic idea was at least cool. Jesus Christ, all these wiki pages drive me insane today. But Tipoma's hot take, but Vista actually still looks great. Flip 3D and Aero Glass were great. A lot of systems were just solid under respect for it and some early driver issues. I 100% agree. Does it look great necessarily by all modern standards? I would say it probably still looks good. But it definitely has aged, in my opinion, better than XP. Like, I think XP thoroughly looks like a late 90s, early 2000s system. Like, I know it changes a lot from like Windows 98 and stuff, but in my opinion, Windows Vista feels at least like a 21st century design. But let's actually get back to some Apple stuff here. So we got distracted for long enough. And Apple announced this. This is on their website. This is not a leak. This is not a rumor. This is not a warning. This is not a drill. This is official. And the reason why we are talking about the redesign is actually quite simple. It's this 25 in WWDC 25. Because, at least in my opinion, this looks very glassy. This looks very transparent / translucent, however you want to describe it, right? It looks rather chic, I have to say. Like, and looks very, very much Vision OS inspired, right? Like, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to have Vision OS 2. They should still have some basic design principles of the OS here. So you see, right, how the icons float, the windows float in the air. They're transparent / translucent. You have the controls basically on your left. Those are kind of shiny, at least from most perspective. They are designed to look as if they're reflecting light. Obviously, the home screen here, you see everything from the shininess. There is, of course, the aspect of Vision OS that I don't like, which is circular icons. Never been a huge fan of all icons being uniformly circles. I think I prefer if every icon is supposed to have the same shape, I would like it to be a rounded square, like we see here. But my preference, as I showed with macOS Catalina, would actually be a more free form of icon designs, where some are circular, some are more rectangular, some are just weirdly shaped, right? Like when you look, for example, at Pages, Keynote, and Numbers here, which I always think are very good representations of whatever design language Apple is going for, right? And you see, they still have a lot of like real world detail that we had like from the skeuomorphic era design. These days, it's very, very flat, right? But then their shape is very free, right? This is a rectangle sheet that points in one direction, and then a pencil that even slightly sticks out. We have the chart here that completely does not conform to one shape. We have what's it called? The podest. That's the German word for it. Don't know why I'm blanking out in English. But like where you put your notes during your presentation. So yeah, definitely like this was my preference. And I had hoped that this would come to iOS. I know that iOS is primarily designed to be tapped with our fat fingers. And that makes it different from some of the freedoms that you can give to macOS. Still think you can find some middle ground there. Yeah, but that's about where we are at, where we kind of have to be guessing about Dub's reveals based on how glossy and transparent / translucent the 25 is. Relay saying we all miss the older OS systems and the new ones are all bloated. I entirely disagree. I actually am pretty good at getting rid of rose-colored glasses, because I don't know. I guess I covered this in a way. Like, I mean, it's not like my job or anything, but have like over 200 videos now on this channel and stuff like that. It's now been going on. Technically, this channel is actually 4 years old, right? I recently hit the birthday, but I've been more seriously posting for around 2 years. And I don't know, like, I guess seeing, like, dealing with the news so directly, right? I don't just, like, I cannot just skim it. I have to, like, actually read it with you guys and analyze it. It always just brings to my attention that despite having pretty mature operating systems, we still see plenty of new features, new experimentation with designs, like with Android, for example, right? Arguably, like Android 16, 15, and 14, they were all very small releases, but at least Android is now in a shape, I would argue, where it has no embarrassing elements anymore, right? Previously in the past, it had very inconsistent performance, very inconsistent animations. Now the latter is more vendor specific, like One UI 7 still having some non-fixed animations. But Android as a baseline is pretty good. The fact that it runs pretty well on like the abysmal Tensor G4 in the latest Pixels is quite good and quite promising to me. But it's just the fact that, like, I think it's easy to just focus on, like, oh, back then this was new and shiny and it wasn't bloated, which is also not true. Steve Jobs had literally, like, keynote, like, it wasn't bloated in the sense that it had fewer features, right? I would argue like there's pretty much nothing I would take out of iOS as bloat to get more stability. I would argue Apple needs to deliver features and stability. And to me personally, iOS has always been really stable. I apologize. I just never had that many bugs or that many issues. And my choice of iOS versus Android never came down to like, oh, I think Android is garbage. I just genuinely preferred Apple's take on modern operating systems. And this is why I am not tempted now to switch now that people are saying, oh, iOS is bad. There's one thing that I recently saw, which if this was even remotely like applicable to Apple, people would be going nuts. What was it? No, it's not WatchOS. Is it Wear OS or it's Android Wear? I always forget what it's called. It's Wear OS 5.1. So this came out just a day or so ago, almost two, I believe. But like Google has like the Pixel Watch, right? And they only have 3 generations of it out there, and it hasn't changed much since its introduction. They partnered with Samsung. Samsung was kind of the leader of Android smartwatches, right? So Google worked with them, optimized for the latest chips from Qualcomm, and basically relaunched their own mobile operating system, their own watch operating system. So whereas 4 and 5 were pretty big deals in the industry, but now we are kind of like in the refinement era of all of this. And it's just like, I think if we had regular reports like this about watchOS, people would say that Apple has lost all of its glitz and glamour, that the golden days are behind us, that Steve Jobs is rolling in his grave, right? So we have delayed notifications, watch face editing causes crashes, feedback syncing not being up to speed, and even full touchscreen freezes. By the way, touchscreen freezes is something that I've seen occasionally, like regularly for Wear OS stuff, right? This like four like almost system defining bugs, right? Because think about it. What do you do with your watch, right? You expect it to have notifications. You expect it to be stable and be able to touch the freaking touchscreen. You expect to have a customizable watch face option. And you want to sync your fitness data, right? All of these things would be like, I don't know, like grounds for impeachment of Tim Cook as Apple's CEO. He would be like tarred and feathered and thrown out. To me, all of this is way worse than the Siri delay, and I've been plenty of critical for Apple's willingness to adopt misleading marketing, push out ads that show features that clearly aren't ready yet. Now, I have also defended them because they actually had the bravery to not launch a broken feature the way that Google originally launched Gemini. They also are working now on a feature that is like 66 to 80% complete. So giving them an extra year. As somebody who plays a decent amount of video games, this is a delay that I'm very familiar with. It's the polishing phase. It's basically meeting customer expectations. Just recently, we had that for Assassin's Creed Shadows, and it admittedly launched in a way better stage than most recent Ubisoft titles, which isn't saying much for Ubisoft, but it's just a standard now. With technology being more complicated, more bloated, or more fully featured, if you want to be a glass half full kind of guy, you will experience potentially more issues than you did in the past. Tippermaster, what probability would you put in macOS 16 being the one to drop Intel? I don't think they will yet fully drop Intel, but I think we might be down to like 1 or 2 generations. I think that like the first generation 16-inch MacBook Pro that they introduced like right before, I think that will probably get it, and maybe like the Mac Pro, right? The one that they launched at the very end. Before Apple Silicon, but I definitely think we are nearing like a full and complete shutdown of Intel Macs getting the latest macOS version. Focus, in my opinion, Apple designing is very coherent and overall, but iOS 7 made an overcommitment in the color palette, making everything rainbowness, 100 shades of rainbow all over the place. Now they're stuck to this. I actually, like, if this is your legit preference, which you put very nuanced and very detailed, I actually agree. Like, it's not my opinion. I like a colorful OS, and I think that Apple is just where I think they're not going overboard, but I agree that they might be close, especially with some things. Like, for example, the Apple Maps icon. I never liked that we have like green, yellow, orange, and pink and blue in one icon. I think that works like for the literal like rainbow effect, for example, in the photos icon. I think it actually works really well. But yeah, for some stuff, I think they went a little overboard. And if you are not into super like colorful stuff, I fully understand that. Like, even like what I would dislike, for example, in this type of comment is if you said, oh, it's garbage, it's rainbow, as if that is not a valid approach to design whatsoever. But if you're just saying, oh, they overcommitted a bit, it's not quite my cup of tea, I think that's a super valid opinion. And I think that over time, when you actually look at it, right, like look at iOS 7 Control Center, for example. Mahmoud Yusuf, haven't seen you in a while. Welcome to the chat, bro. Right, I would argue the iOS 7 Control Center really went overboard with the translucency, with some of the vibrancy of the individual buttons. It was like, to me, I have a mild case of like not being able to very well differentiate colors and shit like that. And plus, by the way, this was a hell to grab, right? This was like really inconvenient design element, and was only made worse by the fact that they put the perfect grabbable UI element with this little dot right down there, right? So I think that iOS 7 legit went in some areas overboard, but iOS 8, 9, and 10 actually corrected some stuff of that. Maybe not necessarily the icon specifically, but they definitely tuned down some of the transparency elements where it could legit get distracting. Like the keyboard in iOS 7 was so translucent that sometimes if you had a really vibrant color underneath that keyboard in like your browser or whatever, right, it legit made some stuff hard to see, and I'm very glad that they moved away from that. They one thing that I always liked that Rene Ritchie used to say is that accessibility is not just for like people with disabilities or anything like that. It's ultimately it's more options for all of us. It's little tweaks and adjustments here and there. It's something you can adjust yourself. Stuff like reduce motion, for example. Now these days I would argue Apple's animations and everything is so perfect I wouldn't really want to activate that. But back in the day when you might have an older iPhone and the operating system kept getting more demanding, I know plenty of people who activated reduce motion to just keep the system smooth and responsive, right? Kev Chatter joining the chat. I'm late. What did I miss? Well, we are talking about Apple's WWDC announcement. We are talking about Apple's history of OS designs. We are talking about broad comparisons all the way back to iOS 7, the Windows Vista and Aero days, and macOS Aqua, OS 10 Aqua. So plenty of stuff to contribute. If you have a hot take, let us know. A Tipo Master, I've also had the notification chat not drawing down until a reboot for several months on watchOS, alarms not going off, and just going through the motions of doing so several hours later. Alarms, this is actually a good thing here for you to mention. Man, this video won't have timestamps. We're just all over the place. watchOS, what is this, 11.4 now? Yeah, I don't know if maybe you have done this to yourself. I didn't even know this was an issue because I don't use alarms on my Apple Watch. With the watchOS 11.4 update that's set to be released soon, Apple is making a small but useful change to the way that alarms work on the Apple Watch. The update includes an option to allow the wake-up alarm you set up for sleep mode to break through when silent mode is activated on your watch, which means you'll be less likely to sleep through your alarm going off. Right? Don't know if maybe that wasn't as much a bug as this was an issue for you. Could be a bug. I couldn't actually talk too much about that because I myself do not use alarms on my Apple Watch. But yeah, maybe that helps some of you guys. So I don't know about Tim Apple being tarred and feathered for equivalent. Well, none of the bugs, by the way, Tipo Master, let's be quite honest. Nothing you just described is... You don't get your notifications. You cannot sync your fitness data. Literally, not like you're literally saying the notification chat not drawing down until a reboot. Like, do you mean the actual notification center, or is it like an animation that wouldn't activate? And again, if it's fixable completely via reboot, it can sometimes just be garbage that accumulates in your OS. It's like stuff that is cached. Like I never have that issue, and I use notifications daily on my watch. But like these things, and I acknowledge it. The more mature an operating system is, there is chance that unless you spent like 5 years just refining it, but you actually kept adding new features, which is what consumers unfortunately want. Not unfortunately, I'm not in the camp of like, oh, we need a new Mac OS OS 10 Snow Leopard release every year. And by the way, neither does the community. There is 10 times more engagement with the WWDC announcement because of the transparent and translucent 25 than if Apple had come out specifically and said, this is a year of refinements. We are going back to the Snow Leopard and iOS 12 days. This is something that the community claims to want, but in my opinion, nobody actually wants. Focus, they cannot go back with less colorful now because it will look odd. Well, like less colorful they can, but the question is how much less colorful, right? I would argue it's definitely less colorful these days than iOS 7 itself was, where I think that iOS 7 really tried to boost like every color and shit like that. But can they go to like a super laid back, like fully skeuomorphic design, for example? No, that I definitely agree with. Really, is the design changing with iOS 19 talk credible? Well, we are deriving this from the 25 that you see here. Plus, of course, the Mark Gurman reports in prior videos that we have discussed, plus the front page tag camera app redesign video. So there's like little morsels here and there that are now combining, at least in my opinion, to create a more full image. Now, it should be noted, we will get a new visionOS version at this dub, right? It's gonna be visionOS 3, and Mark Gurman has said that it's actually gonna be very feature-rich, right? So it might just refer to that. It might not, like, usually we understand that iOS and to a lesser degree macOS are the main focus of dub, but Apple could be referring to a new visionOS here for all we know. Tippermaster, mine wasn't the silent mode issue. It's a pretty well-known bug. Well, then I hope it's getting fixed. I have never heard of it. And let's be honest, I hear of shit. My problem is a lot of stuff that is like discussed in in forums and stuff like that. I'm not trying to diminish it, but clearly those issues are not universal, right? Like, I know my mom doesn't have them on her Series 4 Apple Watch. I know a friend of mine doesn't have it on her Series 6 Apple Watch. I know I don't have it on my Apple Watch Ultra 2, right? And these are things that are accumulated over the years. Meanwhile, here we have like one release of Wear OS, and after a week, the very small amount of people that actually use a Pixel Watch come up with all these bugs, right? And enough for like 95 Google to summarize them. This is on an entirely different level in terms of percentage of users afflicted, the severity of the issue. And because, bro, be honest with me, right? We are chill here. You know I don't defend Apple when it's not deserved. It's not like I'm saying your bugs don't exist. It's not like I'm saying you don't deserve to be heard. But it's very clearly on a much different scale relative to the existing user base, of course, than what we just briefly looked at with Wear OS 5.1. Come on now, Mark. Missing a wake-up alarm is easily at least as bad as late notifications. Yeah, if this was a widespread issue, it would be just as bad. I would have no issue saying that. But I literally have not heard that from anyone. Like, I know 15 people who use Apple Watches. Right? I know one person who uses an Apple Watch from a freaking borrowed iPhone because they prefer Android as their main device. Like, I am not trying to, but like these people approach me first and foremost whenever they have bugs and issues, and I've literally never heard one of them say any of that stuff. And by the way, I'm not even shitting universally here on all of Wear OS, or like I have not heard too many bad things about Samsung's Galaxy Watches. Everybody who I know, which is like 3.5 people, because I'm not sure if the fourth one sold his Galaxy Watch as he planned to, because he's making a full switch to Apple, but I don't think he had the money right away to get like an Apple Watch. From everything I heard, like Galaxy Watches are pretty good, especially for the price. They're very often highly discounted here in Germany, down by like 20-30% after a few months. And if you wait a year, you can get like last gen version for almost half off. It's not like I'm universally talking down for everything that's non-Apple related, right? I'm just trying to say that clearly, given all the attention that Apple gets, and I mean, look, we are not the biggest stream out there, but even here we find people mentioning bugs. And even, but like, You know what I mean, right? It's just it's a percentage issue. It's a relative risk issue if you want to describe it in like statistical terms. So let me actually say something about WWDC 2025. It's a week of technology and creativity. So it's the work week from June 9th to June 13th. Obviously, that means the major keynote is going to be on June 9th. Apple will talk about their tools, frameworks, features. Of course, they will bring up third-party developers sometimes on stage. It depends a little bit like how busy the actual keynote is. But don't forget, of course, the WWDC week is filled full of like all kinds of presentations, all kinds of demonstrations. We still have some stuff from last year actually that hasn't actually made its way to to developers. Like I believe that Xcode in the cloud, right, where Apple promised to like basically let you rent cloud Mac infrastructure. I still think that hasn't rolled out. So, and this is a thing that Apple hasn't even addressed fully the way that they've talked about like Siri. So, this is something that I believe that developers, if they're interested, should be making more noise about. But it's probably not as necessary, which is funny because when you think about like a tool like the Mac Mini, right? Think about it. At the same $599, it doubled the memory, right? It jumped from M2 to M4, so a giant like increase in performance, especially in CPU, which is kind of what you most need for development. And you have that cute little redesign. It's even more efficient. You have the Pro version. And now we have like the M4 Max Studio at $2,000 with 36 gigs of memory, like so many cores and shit like that, and a GPU architecture that supports everything from hardware accelerated ray tracing and mesh shading, right? So I actually I'm not even sure if developers even want to rent Mac cloud infrastructure at this point, because the quality of hardware that you can get from Apple in your hands is so good. Is this common to Apple to release the date with website of WWDC a bit early for that? No. WWDC is announced very early always. I kind of always associate it more with April, but I might be wrong. But March, April is very typical for a WWDC announcement, and that's primarily because this is a big live event. And it's expected that, like, for one, Apple invites students, right? They give you like awards if you're like an aspiring young developer, right? So that's something you need to register, and you need to be confirmed, and you need to win. And companies themselves need to choose which developers from our own company do we send. And in the meantime, Apple has to prepare all of that. So no, it's actually quite typical for WWDC to be announced a lot in advance. Like, people come there from all over the world. Some need to save money before it happens. You need to book flights. You need to book hotels. So yeah, there's plenty of ways in which like WWDC is very unique from other Apple events, and in a way always has been. This is not just for the press. This is not just with like one hands-on section in the back of the Steve Jobs Theater. This is like a legit big event with several thousand people. It gives you a lot of opportunity to talk to others, experience Apple's experts and labs, connect to the worldwide developer community. And these days, they're also making all of it available online. So that definitely helps. But you still need to announce it at least 2 months in advance. Could they have gotten away with waiting maybe until some point in April? Sure, but at this point, it doesn't really make any difference. Announce it a week earlier, a week later, right? Yeah, but that's kind of about it. What I have to really say about WWDC. I also just wanted to briefly, because we are talking so much about software, like, we just got the latest iOS 18.4 beta, by the way. Apple has to work right now with the EU to avoid any kind of like punishment with all their regulations. Apple just updated the Apple Music Classical app. Apple is rolling out hearing aid features for AirPods Pro across the world. Right? I'm just trying to tell people whenever I hear like, oh, Apple is not working as fast. Like Apple AirPods Max are getting lossless support over USB-C. Right? Apple is always adding new stuff. The WatchOS 18.4 refinement that we just talked about. Hopefully, it also fixes other alarm-related issues. Maybe also just a system reboot with like a new OS on top will also help people like Tipomaster. But like, there is so much always happening with Apple software. That's not, of course, even to mention all the big stuff planned for DubDub that Apple currently works on. The fact that Apple announced that their main guy from the Vision Pro team is now responsible for Siri. Now, Giandrea is staying as the lead of Apple's AI efforts, but he will not be personally overseeing Siri. It's like a subset of it. He will oversee the bigger whole, which is probably the best, just so that he can focus more on like almost the academical aspect, right? The intellectual property aspect of Apple Intelligence, and then the actual features should be more like given to people who actually have a lot of expertise in like developing for the system itself, right? They don't like just work with abstract LLMs and stuff like that. They're really familiar with targeting iOS. Tipomaster on Genius Bar processor showed a bit of what iMessage looks like with the redesign. Wait, sorry. Genius Bar, John Prosser. 16 minutes ago, Jesus Christ. iOS 19 looks weird. So, do you have a timestamp for me, bro? I apologize for but I don't want to misuse you guys, but this is really something that would help whenever you have like info, because otherwise this could be like not very interesting television to you guys. Don't see it. Did he say how do I use transcript on the web? Jesus. No. Oh, this is riveting television for you guys. Where is it?
That's a lot of money to.
Oh, USB-C charge cable.
Okay, so
there's no circular bubble.
By the way, to anyone who is watching, if you haven't yet liked the video, I know this might not be the most riveting part of the stream, but please like the video. This helps tremendously. You guys see, I love interacting with you, getting your opinions, your breaking news almost, right? This is like it has been happening 16 minutes ago.
Around
Free from gluten.
A lot of these things, I mean, I don't even know how to.
Well beyond.
Oh, is that iOS 19 is rumored to be a massive overhaul? Is that supposed to be like a leak? No, this looks more like
a fresh coat of paint and alter the way people interact with their devices for many years to come.
I mean, we saw that with the camera app. That is an entirely different way to interact with the camera.
If I knew how to use the freaking transcript, around 43 minutes. Thank you. I love it when he actually shows it on his wait, do you mean he showed it in his messages, or is this like a screenshot? Let us have a better
it looks
look.
I feel like they did.
I'm not even going to go into that. I will show you a little something. Would you like to see what iMessage looks like in iOS 19?
Okay, we found it. Thank you. Guys, give all, please, a giant thumbs up to Tipomaster, long-term supporter of the chat, the stream, really engaged in the community. Thank you so much, man.
Sure. Okay, here you go. You're looking at iMessage. And let me turn down the
Okay,
brightness here.
I see what's different.
There
Okay.
you go. iMessage. iOS.
Okay, so we have the very shiny icons. We have the keyboard kind of being. I wonder, like, this is a screenshot, right? Does it suggest that the buttons have like an aura, like a glow to them, right? Does the shininess here move like in the circle, or is it just permanently fixed in place? Because that would be a very different effect. And you can even see that like it looks like a fizzle out effect, right? So around the keyboard.
iOS 19. How do we
Why does it
feel?
look kind of ugly? How
You
does
think it looks
uglier
ugly?
somehow? How does it look uglier somehow?
It's a screenshot. It looks pretty ugly, I have to say.
You see like the cute little bubble icons, Vision OS icons, slightly different keyboard, you know.
I don't think. I will have to say this would, to me, like if this was just like a 2D version of the shininess that, like, and I've said that time and time again on this channel, Vision OS exists in a 3D plane. It exists in the video pass-through that you get through the cameras, and it of course exists for you to be touched. I don't know if these elements are like if these elements are shiny and they like change their shininess, which granted is a lot of it's a lot of system resources going to animating buttons constantly. I'm not sure what that will mean for like the battery life on like A12 and A13 and even A14 devices.
But it looks. I feel like they didn't like actually redesign it. They only put random.
No. This is you're looking at a full redesign. Isn't that great? Isn't it dramatically different?
Well, the top looks the same, and the bubbles look. Surely they're going to change the way the bubbles look a little.
And by the way, I this is actually exactly what I dislike about all of these redesign talks, where he's like, certainly Apple will redesign what the bubbles look like. The bubbles are instantly recognizable. The bubbles are functional. What redesign would you want them to give to them? Would you want them to be like fully circular? At that point, they're not very space efficient. It would result in more scrolling. Do you want them to give them randomly a new color after all this time that blue has been associated with iMessage? This is the kind of attitude that I really dislike towards redesigns. I think you can very good criticize some of this stuff here, but like asking for more is honestly weird, especially if you don't even like all the changes. Why would you be like asking for more changes in the same vein? By the way, let me just briefly make sure that my stream is still working fine. Yeah, it is.
You don't think it looks dramatic? Oh, no. There weren't any bubbles. These weren't bubbles before. They're bubbles now, you see. On iMessage now...
Oh, come on, bro. Like, are you really that unfamiliar with the operating system you cover?
Just, there's no circular bubble around anything. It's just, it is what it is.
Okay.
So, how do we feel?
Okay, I don't care about their opinions in this regard. It wasn't real. It didn't definitely blow my socks off. I don't hate it. I have to see how it performs in motion. Plus, again, I have no idea at what stage of development John gets his leaks. Don't forget that even throughout the beta periods after WWDC, Apple still changes plenty in the operating system. So I will reserve my judgment first for WWDC and then how the betas develop. But thank you so much to anybody letting me know what's actually happening. Let's just see if there's any other big news and rumors that I missed. So WWDC, of course, Apple buying shit from NVIDIA, probably to train the AI, Thunderbolt docks, new iPhone 17 Air image. Okay, so these are just mock-ups continuously. Really, I just want more battery life on iOS 19. What device do you have? I always call you Relay. Is it Riley? Like I always read it weird. I apologize. Yeah, I don't think that we have that much more stuff to cover about DubDub. I mean, it's great that we even had this leak, right? Um, again, I wish people would comment on the stuff they're leaking. It's one of my pet peeves with Mark Gurman, where I'm like, bro, like, it's like always like, oh, I leave this stuff basically for next week. I'm like, I understand that's how you make your money, but like, you're really leaving people in suspense. You have a 16 Pro Max and you want more battery life. Honestly, bro, I have to say, like, I think people have gotten a little bit unrealistic with how much battery life they need or how much they expect. Because you wouldn't want Apple to put worse cameras in the device, right? Worse speakers, worse microphones, worse haptics. Now, I know some of you have asked for the removal of camera control, but clearly camera control doesn't take up that much space inside the device. Like the 17 Pro Max is getting thicker, probably with a larger battery. The 17 Air is introducing most likely silicon carbon batteries to the iPhone. And maybe in a year or two, we could see the form factor of the Pros, but combined with the battery density of the Airs, right? But yeah, like to me, it's just like, believe me, I want more battery life, for example, on my 15 Pro Max. But that's because my 15 Pro Max is also pretty degraded at this point. So it always had 10 to 15% less battery life than the 16 Pro Max. Like 5% less battery capacity, less efficient components, right? And now it's degraded by, I would argue, 15 to 20% almost. And part of that has to do with the way I use it, right? I install every beta. I charge it to 100%. I charge it wirelessly. I use it while charging it, right? So there's plenty that I do that I know is really hitting my battery. It says it's at 87% battery capacity. I would probably put it closer to like 82. But that means now that I'm realistically at like a level of battery life that is like 1/3 lower than yours, and I still get throughout the entire day. Unless it's super bright outside and I have to use maximum brightness, but that's rather rare. So let us actually get to a piece of news that I know you guys would love me to cover. We are almost at the 1 hour mark. I want to remind you guys, if you haven't yet done so, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out with anybody who you think might enjoy it, and comment. You see, I love interacting with your lively, with a lively live chat. You can also become a direct supporter of this channel by becoming a channel member or a supporter over on Patreon. Thank you for, and of course, you can leave a direct donation in the form of a super chat or a super sticker. All support is very, very much appreciated. It's good, gets put right back into the channel. So thank you very much. Now, this is a rumor that makes so much sense, and I honestly try to tell you, never look at numbers in terms of predictions based on node changes. But we have covered in one of the previous videos that A20 might not get 2 nanometer, and I speculated, well, maybe that means A20 doesn't get it, but A20 Pro gets it. Maybe 2 nanometer yields are relatively bad. No. So most people have come out, including the original rumors saying this, and then another source also came out. Apple's A20 processor will be built on TSMC's first GAAFET node, which is TSMC 2 nanometer. Now, that still leaves us without crucial new technologies like backplane power delivery, which should further help with efficiency. And I believe actually it's also designed to create like smaller designs overall. But yeah, A20 A20 for 2 nanometer or 2 nanometer for A20, however you want to see it. Now, people bring up 15% improvement. That completely ignores all architectural changes that will come. Obviously, also an A series chip consists out of the CPU, the GPU, the neural engine, media encoders and decoders, storage controllers, right? Will all of them get universally 15% faster and 15% more efficient? No, some of them might actually improve way more than that. Some might improve way less than that. And one thing that I think is very crucial here, TSMC roadmap A16. Look at the original prediction of the changes between N3E and with N3 here being N3B, that's the node powering the A17 chips and the M3 chips, and then look at N3E, right? There's no direct comparison between the two of them, but like you can see, if this can go all the way up minus 30% versus the same node being compared, while this goes down to minus 34%, it's not a huge leap. It's at the best 10%. Yeah, and in terms of performance, that's versus N5, right? It says it's going to be 18% faster. This is obviously not true. The M4 chip is 18% faster. It's 18 to 22% faster than just the N3B powered M3. Now, yes, it does consume a little bit more power for that. And usually when we talk at performance, we talk about equal power consumption at the same time. But it's way more efficient than just 34% improvement over N5, right? So, and again, it really also depends on which part of the power consumption curve you look, because obviously at its highest clocks and its highest performance levels, N3E might not be that much more efficient than 34% versus N5. But when you like equalize the clock speeds and stuff like that, which is how you're supposed to measure efficiency, it's way more efficient than like the difference suggests here. If anything, N3B was a way smaller uplift than versus N5 than a full 30% in efficiency. I would argue it probably came realistically more between 20 and 25%. So even if N3 was only 34% more efficient than N5, that gives it still a larger gap than we see here from N3B to from N5 to N3B. I use my PC mainly. I charge it 80% every 3 days. Okay. The battery with screen out and standby isn't better than my old 13 Pro Max. On standby, should a 16 Pro Max be much better than the 13 Pro Max? It has a larger screen. It sustains its performance and its peak brightness way better. I would argue if you were to normalize it, right, where maybe you go with 10% less performance, you equalize the brightness entirely, it will definitely outperform a 13 Pro Max in terms of battery life. But given that we tend to use newer devices more intensively, and we definitely don't want to underclock them, not that iOS even gives us a chance to do so really, like I'm not using low power mode, believe me. I'm not pushing my 120 hertz device down to 60. But yeah, like the 13 Pro Max has phenomenal battery life. It's a great device in my opinion. Chip talk is more important. Still fingers crossed for 2nm A19 Pro. Hell, I still have a $150 bet with you guys to a donation of your choosing, where I will donate if we don't get any 3nm chip by the very end of 2025. That includes an M5 chip, an A20 chip. Hell, if Apple puts out a 2nm chip in an Apple Watch this year, it's a surprise. I'll definitely count that as a win for myself as well. But yeah, looking also beyond that, when it comes to chip predictions, like N2 here specifically being like 15 to 20% more performant, or even up to 4. This is, by the way, something okay, so let's look at N2, right? I don't honestly, I'm not sure if N2 can be 30% more energy efficient than N3E. Like, that is a pretty big jump. That would legitimately make it a really, really great note improvement. The fact that it matches, like, and I know some would say, well, it's GAFET and all that stuff. Of course it's supposed to. Don't forget, a lot of early GAFET expectations were with backplane power delivery considered, right? Not even N2P is getting backplane power delivery. We are only getting it with A16. So forget the prediction numbers. It will still depend very much on the architecture. Also depends on like what memory does Apple use, right? Is the memory faster? Is it more efficient? Is there a better storage? What kind of modem is it combined with? So plenty of other stuff that will impact your battery life and shit like that. And then, of course, the most interesting thing of it all, which is we might get N2 a little bit later than we had hoped, right? Relay, you asked, like, we had hoped it would be at least on A19 Pro. Now it looks like it's going to power the A20 series. But A16 is very interesting. And my prediction is that we are seeing the biggest leap actually in 2027. Because look, both N2P, which is just a slightly refined N2, and A16, which is the backplane power delivery version of their first GAFET node, technically making it their second GAFET node. It's also bringing further efficiency improvements in density, which I'm not sure that N2, like you can see, N2P and N3E are both more dense than N3E. But the biggest change in density is that we are finally seeing a density improvement for cache. So if we see a logic increase, a logic density increase, a cache density increase, plus the improvements of backplane power delivery on A16, and we get it simultaneously with N2P, my speculation is that N2P will be sort of what N3E was for the rest of the industry, right? Think about it. Apple got N3. So some might say, well, then the others should only get N3B next year, right? But no, they got the same note as Apple because N3E is a cheaper, more economical successor to N3, and TSMC quickly updated all its factories to focus on N3E rather than N3B. Think about the same thing for N2. Apple will be most likely the one company to get N2 first, or N2B, or whatever it's going to be called specifically, right? And then the year after, could Apple switch to N2P? Very likely, sure. But what if N2P becomes more of a cheaper version from TSMC, right? And it's designed to cover everyone else, right? Qualcomm, AMD, even Intel to a degree, NVIDIA definitely. But Apple, because they focus on the highest efficiency chips available, will use whatever 8 to 10% performance gains, whatever 15 to 20% efficiency gains they can get, and simultaneously launch A16 while everybody else in 2027, because if production starts in the second half of 2026, it's a 2027 chip, then Apple could be on A16 in late 2027, while the rest switches for the very first time to a GAFET node, which is N2 or N2P, right? Depending a little bit on how quickly they build out the factories. Ben Vinny saying, battery life seems good on the 16 Pro Max, but if those rumors about iOS 19 is true, I have to say goodbye to the battery life. Well, it depends. None of the rumors say specifically that it's going to be like more demanding with its animations and stuff like that. That's something that I've speculated about like just now, right? Whether or not like the icons will actually be constantly like shining and switching in their glow. Sorry, I wrote wrong, lol. A15 against A18 Pro. I don't know which... oh, yeah, that's because of the comparison of the 13 Pro Max versus the 16 Pro Max. Yeah, but that's it for the chip rumors. I don't think we have that much big stuff to say. It's definitely good that we are seeing the changes happening. I've made my predictions, good and bad. Let's see how they all pan out. Riley, wasn't the problem with A17 Pro Apple not cooling it well enough rather than early 3 nanometer node? Yes and no. Realistically, the performance, like, I mean, we can go to Geekbench, right? Let's just focus on the CPU, because the GPU is slightly weird. The GPU also, like, Apple could have used faster than 6400 megatransfers memory if they like redesigned the memory controller. So I don't even want to speculate how much the GPU might be bottlenecked in some ways on the A17 Pro by using the same memory bandwidth as the A16. So going with the browser, going with iOS. So when we look at the A17 Pro versus the A16, so that's okay. So mine performs a little higher. Mine definitely goes to like 2950. But let's just use a nice round 2900 versus 2600. So that's an 11% increase in single core performance. Like, I think people expected more, but don't forget that a lot of people didn't expect the A16 chip even to be what it was, right? Like, it is a 4 nanometer chip, and the comparisons being made in here, they are N3B versus N5. N4 was actually a pretty decent uplift for like a mid-gen upgrade in that regard. But I do think that most people still widely expected it to be more than 11% uplift. However, once we actually look at multi-core, this is where we actually get a pretty decent uplift, right? Well, mine performs better than this. Mine performs close to 7,500. Let's use 7,300. Geekbench always errs on the lower side, and let's use 6,700. So that's just 9%. Okay. I always thought that the A17 offered larger multi-core increase than that. This cannot be just from cooling, because the node, the cooling in the iPhone 15 series is slightly better than the one in the iPhone 14 series. So actually, I couldn't tell you, but it's a mix. The issue is N3B is definitely not quite as good as some people hoped it would be. And we see that, in my opinion, from the disproportionately large jump once N3E came out. But is it garbage the way some people said? Like, I know that like MaxTag said like M2 is in a stopgap, and then they said, oh, M3 is also a stopgap, and I'm like, oh my god, we're stopping in this gap for so long. But sorry, I just had to check that I didn't accidentally mute myself. But no, there definitely N3B was not a fantastic node relative to what you could have expected. But don't forget, everyone right now is really struggling with getting FinFET to anything near the level of what TSMC's 3 nanometer is, right? Not Samsung, not Intel, nobody even tried to make a FinFET node that is as dense as TSMC's 3 nanometer. They all are switching to GAAFET for further performance gains. And this is the reason why they don't yet have competitive nodes. They try to leapfrog TSMC. Samsung definitely won't be able to do that, by the way. Their yields are like, from what I understand right now, 1/4 of what TSMC's GAAFET yields are, unless they use like a bastardized versions of their like 3 nanometer node, which is barely better. It's really a mess. But Intel has like 18A coming up. They skipped actually 20A so they can better compete with TSMC, because 20A would have been kind of on the level of TSMC 3 nanometer, which really wouldn't be exciting. But supposedly 18A is going to launch. It's going to be better than N3P in almost every way. So yeah, you can take that however you see. I always argue I'm not as interested in Intel's nodes until I know that, because yields are a percentage, but I would like to know what kind of factory they even have for this node. Do they plan any roll out anything close to TSMC? Because I am sure if TSMC was targeting 1/10 the output that they need for the iPhone, they could push like out 2 nanometer this year, right? But it doesn't make sense. Apple seemingly doesn't want 2 nanometer for the M5 for cost reasons, and they probably want to use whatever cost saving they can make to push the M5 chip also into like server infrastructure, which you really don't want to do that with an almost like experimental node. But yeah, it's a complicated discussion right now. Really, I mean, for better temps, not performance, because a lot of people cared about that. Yeah, like I guess you could say that in general, iPhones need better cooling. I'm not gonna fight you on that. In fact, I actually made a list, and if you guys follow me on Twitter, this is the kind of content I occasionally put out. Apple, I absolutely believe Apple needs to improve cooling across almost all of their passively cooled devices. If anything, I think the only passively cooled Apple device that doesn't really need that much of an improvement, and it's crazy to say because it's the thinnest one, is Apple's M4 iPad Pro. But the iPad Air, the MacBook Air, the iPhone, all of them need better cooling. So I would absolutely agree with that. You said Intel A18 is going to be on par with TSMC's 2 nanometer. It's going to be better than TSMC's 3 nanometer. So it's really hard to say, bro, and especially since we won't have super direct comparisons, because we might see yet another Intel node that is stuck with their now bad CPU architecture. So I really couldn't tell you. But yeah, some people are actually saying it's on path to be as good as 2 nanometer, but coming out almost a year earlier. So by the time N2P comes out, which is supposedly almost definitionally better than A18, Intel will have A18P, or however they're gonna call it. Yeah, TSMC right now is ahead. I would argue TSMC is 5 years ahead of any other FinFET node, but we don't know if maybe the way that Intel has worked in the background, specifically on GAFET, they ignored for years their FinFET nodes, right? Like they got stuck on 14 nanometer, barely moved on to 10, then rebranded everything. So by the time they're now on like a 7/6 nanometer node, they're calling it 4 nanometer. And something close to 5 nanometer, they're calling 3 nanometer. So it's really hard to predict. I doubt Intel can pull off their crazy stunt. Well, they will kind of have to. And I am for competition, right? I know a lot of people always say that, but they don't really mean it. And they say that sometimes about ridiculous things. Like, for example, here in this channel, we talk a lot about like HyperOS iOS clone, right? We talk about how HyperOS copies iOS, right? Stuff like this. And to me, this is not competition. This is laziness on the part of Xiaomi. Oppo is sometimes even worse than that. And looking at that, it's almost impossible to think how it could be worse. By the way, even that Smart Hub thing, By the way, the fact that it's like elongated and covers the entire width, that is also part. It's just not included here. And those rounded icons down there, that's because the iOS 18 notification center switched to this design where the lower controls are, the small controls are all rounded, right? Xiaomi gave you the choice, but their default switched once iOS switched. I know that because I checked recently some Xiaomis with an older operating system where this was still rectangular. But I think it was like 2 years ago. Like it was an operating system from 2 years ago. Oh God. So yeah, but this to me is not competition. This is laziness. This is shit that needs to be, in my opinion, regulated with courts and stuff like that. In my opinion, you absolutely can and even should be inspired by the leading brands, but you cannot just copy them one to one. This is just embarrassing. However, Intel delivering a better node than TSMC and Apple being stuck for at least a year with a node that might not be the best in the industry, that's the competition I want, because that will lead Apple to go to TSMC, give them more money, ask them for better tech, or maybe they will have to work a little bit more aggressively on the architecture rather than rely on the improvements of the node itself. Right? This is the competition I like. And while I'm not the biggest fan of what has become of Intel, I would rather see them healthy and deliver an alternative to TSMC than go down in flames. And that will leave us with TSMC and Samsung. And God knows, Samsung's nodes have not been the greatest. We see that with the Tensor G4. We see that with the modems inside iPhones. Where realistically, Apple should be able to deliver you at least 1 to 2 hours longer cellular battery life, which we see with the iPhone 16e. But yeah, like that's my take. And the last thing I wanted to cover, this is coming from Mark Gurman. This is something that I missed as part of his Power On newsletter. Let me quickly scroll through all this stuff. Here's we see that being covered here too. Apple releases new firmwares. Okay. Where's the Apple Watch? Where's the Apple Watch by Mark Gurman? And after that, I really have to wrap up soon. So there are a couple of parts about the Apple Watch development of future models that Mark Gurman commented on. One part is that blood pressure is really, really hard to measure if you don't have a device that can tighten around you. Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm not sure when Apple will be able to deliver this feature to a level that matches their expectations, a feature that could actually be potentially approved by the FDA in America. But then the main rumor, in my opinion here, and first of all, one thing that's most likely not happening is that we are not getting an Apple Watch SE with plastic design. According to Mark Gurman, there are two roadblocks to it. First, it's not actually that much cheaper. Apple has like massive orders for aluminum and stuff like that. They have very efficient processes of creating aluminum chassis. Plus, in comparison to even like a $200, $250 price, the price of this tiny bit of CNC aluminum is not really high. And the other point is that Apple's designers internally just don't like the design too much. There was one rumor about the Apple Watch Ultra 3. Did I not just click for it to be in English? 9 to 5 Mac, maybe that will help. Okay, so Apple, and this is interesting. What the actual? I don't want to go to Facebook. Jesus Christ. It's the Facebook version of a 95 Mac tweet. Post. Jesus Christ. Mac rumors. Okay, so that's it. So that's the other model we are getting this year, and that is the Ultra 3. That one is getting supposedly a MediaTek modem that supports satellite texting. So that would give it some safety features that like some high-end fitness watches have. And it would be able to connect to 5G, which, given the fact like 4G is not being turned off, but you might have areas that have significantly better 5G coverage these days than 4G. So Apple is using a MediaTek modem that's specifically designed for like low power mid speed versions of 5G. So it's not gonna be gigabit speeds or anything like that. But yeah, it's interesting because thus far we've been stuck with 4G on Apple Watches, no satellite safety features like on the iPhone, and the Ultra is going to rectify it. Interesting, Gurman says that specifically about the Apple Watch Ultra, not like the Apple Watch Series 11, which might make sense if this modem this modem might be more efficient overall, right? But with much greater capabilities, it could still have higher average power consumption, right? Just deliver you way better results. So it might make sense to put it in the Apple Watch Ultra with a larger battery, bigger cooling, bigger space for antennas, and then a year later give it to the regular Apple Watch. Did you see the Apple Watch camera leaks? This is actually the one that I specifically wanted to cover. This is the one I saw and I actually commented on. There it is. So this is the one that I specifically wanted to finish the podcast, or however you want to call this, with. And this is about Apple Watches getting cameras. And this, to me, is bullshit. Now, in what way is this specifically bullshit? Now, this comes from Mark Gurman saying this is targeting a release for 2027. So this is 2.5 years into the future. So we'll have like 2 Apple Watches in the meantime, an Apple Watch in 2025 and an Apple Watch in 2026. So plenty of stuff can change in the meantime. And second of all, he mentioned the same stuff about AirPods, but he contradicted himself in the past, because in the past he talked about AirPods getting cameras for like gestures, air gestures, right? Potentially swiping in the air and clicking in the air, right? For pause, play, and for controlling volume. Right? But then he later switched it up and said, no, those are tiny cameras and they are for visual intelligence. And now he is saying the same thing about the Apple Watch. And I fully believe, you guys, that Apple is working on prototypes of all devices with cameras, testing out how good are those cameras, how much cost do they add, how much battery life do they eat up, how usable are they for features like visual intelligence. However, the Apple Watch is here, right? Where do you aim your camera, right? He said on a future Apple Watch, he expects the camera to be on the right side of the device. This, like, most people are right-handed, right? So they wear the Apple Watch here. So on the right side would mean, okay, so I point it like this, like I'm punching you, like, and that also means that I couldn't, like, I'm supposed to know that I'm, like, shouldn't hold my hand like this, and it would be covered by sleeves potentially. And, like, for men, you will have some hair in the way. Like, this is... Like, I fully understand that Apple, like, and yeah, AirPods are also hit like battery concerns, especially if you just expect some of those features to be constantly on. Like, an IR sensor absolutely makes sense. For one, purely IR is smaller than a camera, so it leaves more space for the battery. It is less power consumption. It works in the dark, rather than a regular camera, right? And especially think about it, how small will these cameras be? And yeah, it's not going to support FaceTime, because obviously if you look at your Apple Watch like this, that would mean your camera is facing this way. This is bullshit. Jan, my German viewer, saying sorry, he's joining from Hamburg. Thank you so much for still coming in. We're almost wrapping up, but you're always welcome to check out the video in full afterwards. So, like, for the AirPods, it's really a big question. For one, about the price, you would need 2 cameras in that way, right? You would need to have enough power, and then you would Apple give you even more gestures now specifically for visual intelligence? Will there be an extra button on the Apple Watch? Will there be like a quadruple tap on the area, or will the cameras also be constantly expected to actually support air gestures? It's all a mess. Like you're saying, in the European Union it will be a no-go. I don't think the European Union would regulate like it out of existence as a feature, but it definitely, like, just for Apple, I think the privacy ramifications, like, think about what we do with our hands. We shake them and stuff. We touch other people. There is a level of trust that comes even with wearing an Apple Watch. For example, you could like voice record yourself all the time and stuff like that. I mean, technically the same thing with like AirPods. But like, if you put a camera on there, it just creates a level of creepiness that I don't think Apple would want for their brand. And again, there are other like, the question is, what Apple Watch would even get this? And my speculation would be maybe the Ultra, because at least that one has like battery and more internal space. But think about it. He says it's near the digital crown. Think about it. You're turning your digital crown. You're pressing your side button. This would be constantly dirty. Think about working out, getting this sweaty and shit like that. Think about swimming with it. There's a reason for why the iPhone, even though it's certified for like water and dust resistance, it's not supposed to be used like in the water or freshly out of the water even. You're supposed to give it a moment or two. The Apple Watch is supposed to be used all the time on you. So, and now the camera would be you facing forward. At that point, why not just take out your phone and use a much better camera, use a choice of multiple cameras, have none of the privacy and security, like, well, less security, but none of the privacy questions by other people. If you have an Apple Watch that houses a camera, you're not and imagine like if Apple increases the base price of the Apple Watch, right, from like 400 to 450 even, right? Not a big increase. But can you imagine that happening? And the basic reason for that is supposedly gonna be the camera. Can you imagine how pissed off people will be? Like, this will be the best advertisement for last gen's Apple Watch. Plus, don't forget, the Apple Watch has a very specific chip. It's a system in package, not even an SoC. It's a very small, like, motherboard where all components are, like, in one. Will Apple put like a super advanced image signal processor on there? Because running the camera is not just like letting the photons hit the sensor. If you want any kind of quality, especially in such a size limited product, you would have to have a pretty great ISP in there. But like, I have no idea. The screen area sounds worse. What do you mean? Like, oh, you mean if they put it in like, oh, I don't want cameras on my Apple Watch at all. I don't want them in the digital crown. I don't want them next to the digital crown. I don't want them I don't want a notch or a dynamic island or a simple camera cutout on the main screen. I don't want cameras anywhere near my Apple Watch. Will look like those four. Yeah, but like I will say like, Apple Watch camera, like, is there like, Oh my god, those are crazier mock-ups than I expected. But Apple Watch camera, dynamic island, I guess. Yeah, like this. Yeah, Apple is not gonna do this. But yeah, if they were to put a camera, I would expect it to be somewhere here, but I don't think it needs one in general. And I'm saying that all camera placement on the Apple Watch would be bad, regardless. This would look the worst, but at least it would allow you to do Face ID, even though like can you imagine the battery life? Like, what's the capacity? Apple Watch battery capacity. Series 10. Oh, Jesus Christ. Did we not have a leak for that? In milliampere hours, please. MAH. 327. That's for the smaller 42 millimeter. Is there one for the larger one? 46. Cellular, memory, camera, battery. No, that's the battery for the. Wait. Okay, so there's no specific number for the smaller one. So it's up to 15 times smaller than a Pro Max. But let's just say it's 10 times smaller than a lot of iPhones these days, which are most of them are well over 3,000. In fact, even the iPhone 16e that was just introduced has the capacity of 4,000. Can you imagine how bad FaceTime battery life would be? Can you imagine even just the impact of using visual intelligence just once on a device with such a small battery capacity? And yeah, even if we switch to something like silicon carbon, because silicon carbon is also not magic. Silicon carbon gives you like 10, 15, maybe 20% higher density. So that would leave us, let's say, 400 milliampere hours, all other things considered equal. I know some other Apple Watches have like bigger batteries, but they usually don't have the same speaker quality. They don't have the same microphone quality. They don't have anywhere near the same haptics. Plus, even Apple's little attachment mechanism eats a little bit more into the space of the device than on other devices. Plus, Apple Watch is pretty thin and stuff like that. So I don't see it going crazy. Let's actually look. What's the capacity of the Ultra? Was it somewhere in the 500 range? Apple Watch Ultra 2. Battery 564. So even if we get this one to like 700 milliampere hours, I guess it could turn those features from completely unusable to nigh usable, but it's still not a sacrifice I would want to be paying. Yeah, but that's my take. I think, and this is all the stuff that I wish, when I said previously that I wish Mark Gurman was able to comment more on his leaks, like, he should be telling us, like, for AirPods, for example, like that like other leakers have talked about them having infrared cameras, right? But now, according to Mark Gurman, those are regular cameras. I think it's very important to address that. And even like, I think that you, as an analyst in a way, you need to also address some features, in my opinion, in a realistic way. Like, okay, look, AirPods are more like this, right? Like, where do I aim with them? Part of them is covered literally by my cheek flesh and stuff like that. Okay, let's say you're a very thin person who doesn't have that issue. Still, where exactly do you aim it? So, like, where would the camera be? Would it be like on the front-facing part of the stem or the down-facing part of the stem? Would you have to be constantly adjusting it? Which, don't forget, Apple Watches, especially AirPods Pro, they are designed to stick nicely in your ear. If you constantly move it around, that kind of defeats the purpose of features like active noise cancellation. Yeah, so this is where I just wish Mark Gurman would give us more details. How likely is this feature even to happen? Will this feature result in higher cost? What will be the impact of battery life? How does it compare to other leaks and rumors? But alas, he just likes giving us shit in advance for a couple of years, and then it never really happens. Like, there's plenty of stuff that hasn't happened. Obviously, stuff like port-free iPhones. Mark Gurman brought that up again, like a week before. Which obviously didn't happen by the iPhone 14, which was kind of when it was rumored to happen. Then the iPhone 15 got USB-C, and the iPhone 15 Pro got 10 gigabit USB-C. So even the super thin iPhone 17 Air is getting MagSafe, by the way, right? Which I know that's not an anti-rumor for portless, but like Apple is in premium iPhones putting in both. Right? They could have made like an iPhone SE or an iPhone 16e that gets entirely rid of wireless charging. They got rid of MagSafe because it's cost cutting, but they know a lot of people still wirelessly charge. They could have made an experimental iPhone, like a 17 Air would have been a good opportunity to go portless, but they gave it both MagSafe and USB-C again. So to me, this idea that like, oh, all this stuff expected in 2026 or 2027, these are usually the rumors that I trust least, and they're also the rumors that will transform the most over time, right? Mark Gurman will at some point come out and say like, oh, the cameras became infrared cameras, or Apple decided that the feature eats up too much battery life, right? And he will say that in a way that doesn't invalidate what he said before. But realistically, Apple might not look at like internal designs with AirPods with cameras at like something serious, right? They might look at it and think, oh, it's a nice prototype. Maybe at some day we will have the tech, right? But Mark Gurman will present this as like, oh my God, it's coming in 2026. It's coming in 2027. And then it doesn't. So again, I shit on this rumor enough. If it ends up being true, hey, that's some shit on my face. But we'll have to see up until that point. Okay, so we do have the dub discussions. We do have the front page tech leak. Nothing new here. I might put that in my thumbnail. Might help. Does 95 Mac have anything new to say? They're talking about the iOS 18.4 release candidate, more software features being rolled out, and then, of course, dub. Okay, thank you, guys. We actually stayed here longer than I thought we might, over 1.5 hours. Thank you to anyone who still found me. We actually had a very lively live chat. We had you guys pretty engaged, suggesting topics, even suggesting me breaking info. What does Series even get, though? It probably just gets a new chip. My question I always ask, like, it might get like an even better panel. Like, I know the Ultra 3 will likely get the panel tech from the Series 10, which Apple calls LTPO3. That's what allows it to like have like the actual seconds shown during always on display, which finally might make always on mode actually usable for me. But beyond that, I'm not sure. Do you need, like, imagine if Series 11 comes out and it has, let's say, a 25% better chip. It's more efficient in a way. It might not get the best modem stuff, or it might get part of it, right? Maybe it gets like the 5G capabilities, but not the satellite stuff, right? Maybe it just doesn't have the internal physical space to deal with a satellite connectable antenna. But realistically, if you don't like what Series 11 has to offer and you plan on upgrading, right, Series 11 will come out and it will make the Series 10 cheaper. Hell, if you want something much cheaper, you go with Series 9 and Series 8, still very good Apple Watches, right? Still a lot of them available, never used before. Yeah, this is why I'm always for having new stuff. I don't want it like every 6 or 9 months, and I'm fine with sometimes even going outside the 12-month timeline. Like, for example, I'm not angry that Apple didn't upgrade the Apple Watch Ultra 2 to Ultra 3. But if they had, it would have had very little upgrades, right? It would have basically had the LTPO 3 panel. So yeah, you can see it how you want in that regard. To me, I definitely am not upgrading my Apple Watch Ultra 2 anytime soon, to be quite honest. Like probably at least until Apple Watch Ultra 5 or something like that, unless like my mom's Apple Watch breaks. But even then, I'm not sure if she would want my Apple Watch Ultra. It's rather big. Yeah, guys, but my voice is coming to an end, and so is this stream. Thank you so much for joining. Last shout out to do all the YouTube jazz, subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, and of course leaving super chat and super stickers whenever you catch me live, becoming a channel member right here on YouTube, or a supporter over on Patreon. I don't know when I'll be able to stream next, but I hope still at least some point in early April. And then by late April, I should be back to a somewhat regularly scheduled program. But beyond all that, thank you guys so much for tuning in, for making this very lively, very engaged. And I'll see you guys next time. And let me know what you would like to see me cover next. Until next time, this is Mark Tech, tuning out.